If there are rune stones to be found, they will become the property of the Empire. And its allies.
Unproduced toys have been treasures of legend for Gen X-era toy collectors. So many toy lines had their lifespans cut short right before things started getting good. Whether we're talking about the lost second wave of Panache Place Voltron toys, or the cancelled Superpowers Tower of Darkness, the magic of childhood toys is most often only exceeded by toys that almost were. Some of the most infamous of these toys aren't even from cancelled lines, simply cancelled characters, the most famous being the rocket-firing Boba Fett from Kenner's Star Wars. And Star Wars is where we find not only unreleased figures, but 2 unreleased waves of toys, as well as an entire unreleased line of figures intended for 1986. The first is the misfired attempt to keep Star Wars going beyond the films, what Kenner dubbed the Epic Continues. None of this stuff was made, so it all remains apocryphal pipe dreams. The second was Kenner's cartoon-based Ewoks line, in development for a second year of toys that didn't manage to happen. Probably because the line was called Ewoks, but some bonehead decided to only make 2 Ewoks in the first wave and load the rest of the slots with ugly Dulocks. The third lost wave of Kenner's Star Wars was tied to their cartoon-based Droids line. No second wave despite everything being tooled up and ready to go. Ever since the rare images and surviving prototypes of these lost toys have surfaced over the past 3 decades, collectors have wished for their own copies of these plastic grails. The reaction Alien figures blew the doors open to the possibilities when they effectively produced Kenner's cancelled Alien figure line, saving it from a conceptual purgatory. Suddenly, it wasn't necessary to customize unreleased figures through kit bashing, sculpting, and paint. The rise of the maker movement was turning the creation of unreleased toys from fantasy to reality. As I said in our Star Wars Follies episode about droids, I was one of the many kids who jumped ship when droids and Ewoks began supplanting the movie-based toys in stores. The cartoon-looking figures were not what I wanted, and it didn't help that the characters themselves were rather ugly for the most part, and the figure choices were fairly scattershot across the various episodes of the series. Kenner made sure to make most of the characters from the pilot adventure, but then filled the other slots with a few characters from the second story cycle, as well as recycling Boba Fett and the A-Wing pilot. While Boba Fett was actually in the first story cycle of the series, the A-Wing pilot was probably jammed into the line because Kenner made the A-Wing the flagship vehicle of the figure series. As a result, a number of key characters weren't present in the first wave, and the anthology-style structure of the show definitely made each character so transient, I can't imagine kids getting excited about them enough to buy them when every 4 episodes the hero and villains were changing. Despite my generation rejecting this line at the time, it is now worth a fortune for reasons beyond reason. Kenner had planned a second year of figures, but the cartoon series floundered, so the toy line never went ahead. Tragically, this is where we would have seen the Droids figure series come into its own. The Droids line in Wave 1 lacked 2 things needed for a Star Wars toy line to succeed. It needs a daring hero, and it needs an Imperial villain. Wave 1 had 2 reckless youths who, aside from their hairstyles, were interchangeable. And it had 2 alien villains that looked like snot on a handkerchief. And let me be clear, these heroes are no heroes at all. Thal Jobin takes a job with a galactic corporation, and Jan Tosh joins the Empire. I'm not kidding. It wasn't until the third story cycle that a suitable hero and villain would appear on the show. With the third story arc, we were introduced to Mungo Baobab, a galactic adventurer much in the vein of Han Solo, except he didn't have Solo's distaste for droids.
And droids are important friends, too.
Why, thank you, Master Mungo.
Mungo found himself not only the central character in the final story cycle of the series, but also the droids' TV movie, The Great Heap. He faced off against a tyrannical Imperial officer, Admiral Screed, in all of these adventures with C-3PO and R2-D2. These 2 characters alone, I believe, would have elevated the appeal of the Droids figure line. But unfortunately, they weren't introduced until after audiences had given up on the show at the end of the first season, suffering the humdrum hijinks of Thal Jobin and Jan Tosh. Kenner had planned to include them in the second wave of figures, but you know how that went down. Thankfully, for those of you who collect vintage Star Wars and love droids, ProCustomFigures have recreated the unproduced prototypes of Mungo and Screed in the form of fully manufactured Kenner-style action figures. Both are very well made and feel like Kenner-quality figures. As the original prototype images suggest, Mungo comes with a 4-LOM blaster, and Admiral Screed comes with an AT-AT driver rifle. But that's not all. ProCustom went ahead and made the entire roster of Lost Wave 2 action figures for droids. In addition to the best hero and villain the series had to offer, Wave 2 also gives us Cleb Zelic, a crime lord who ran a mining operation in the opening episode of Jan Tosh's story arc. The figure appears true to the prototype, including the janky arms that make holding his Bosk rifle almost impossible. Jan's story involved the rescue and redemption of a deposed alien prince, Monjolpa. Suffering amnesia, they initially called him Kez Iban, and Kez received a figure in Wave 1. For Wave 2, Kenner planned to provide Monjolpa in his royal robes with scepter, which ProCustom has faithfully recreated for its figure, complete with the Kenner-style robe legs common on figures like Anakin Skywalker, Imperial Dignitary, and the Emperor. Monjolpa is one of the most striking figures in the ProCustom's Lost Wave. He really pops on a shelf. Kenner also intended another character from the Jan Tosh story arc, Jessica Mead, Jan's friend on their adventures with the droids. Jessica looks like this in the show, so when you see her prototype and the resulting ProCustom figure, you can't help but wonder why they didn't get her skin tone closer to correct. This wasn't an uncommon occurrence in action figures at the time. Spirit, anyone? As it is, Jessica looks, well, ashen and ill. Accurate to the prototype, yes, but in both cases, she's probably the weakest entry in the Lost Wave assortment. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me why Kenner opted to omit the major villain from Jan Tosh's story arc when it's clear they gave so much of Wave 2 over to his adventure. Cleb Zelic was only a minor antagonist in Jan's journey. The main villain was a space pirate named Kybo Ren. Look, I'm just the messenger. I mean, yes, Cleb Zelic is a better design for a villain marginally. He looks more in place in Star Wars than Kybo Ren, who looks like a Pirates of Darkwater reject. So in that sense, maybe that was the reason. Whatever, it's just droids, right?
How rude!
Kenner also planned to give us 2 more villains from Mungo's adventure to find the runestones in the final episodes of Droids. Governor Kung, who ran the runestone mining operation, alongside his lieutenant enforcer, an alien named Gaff. Kung is packed with a strange gray accessory that looks like a giant key, but could be some kind of blaster, which is again accurate to the Kenner prototype. Kung is a colorful figure to be sure, and a nice display piece, but again not the kind of fun we had known Star Wars to be up until that point. Droids had 2 short, portly goons in Wave 1, with Sissy Fromm and Uncle Gundy. Kenner was about to double down on this in Wave 2, with Kung and the aforementioned Cleb Zelic. They needed more figures in the line like Gaff, honestly. Not only was Gaff this cool alien thing, but he was head and shoulders above most of the other characters. And he had a pimp blue cape in the same kind of cloth Kenner was putting on Superpowers figures in 1985. Even though he doesn't have a weapon, he doesn't need one. Gaff is the business. In fact, I'd go so far as to say Gaff is one that could blend best into a cantina scene as a background character in a Kenner display. Overall, characters like Jessica Mead and Wave 1's Kia Mall probably blend best as Kenner background denizens in terms of human figures. But as far as the aliens go, Gaff is a versatile figure for a Star Wars shelf, and the ProCustom version is spot on.
Hey, haven't seen you around here before. Those are some great abs you've got. You obviously work out. So if we hit it off tonight, am I gonna end up being your breakfast tomorrow? Oh, right. Well, I better go find my friend. I have a feeling he's getting himself into trouble. Now that is what I call a fine box.
Finally, Kenner chose to dip back into the Thal Jobin adventures to give us Vlix, the head of security for the Frome gang, of which Sissy and his son Tig appeared in Wave 1. Vlix is infamous in Star Wars collecting circles as being one of the rarest figures ever.
10,000?
Appearing very briefly in toy shops in South America under the Glasslight label with slightly redone paintwork and a different accessory. ProCustoms offers both versions of Vlix, one with the prototype paint job and AT-AT driver rifle weapon, and the Glasslight version with the black snowtrooper rifle. Kenner's Droids has become highly coveted in recent years, but I often wonder if the fervor is justified. Admittedly, a lot of my attitude comes from first-hand memories of droids, both on TV and on toy store shelves, and what a disappointment it ended up being for me. At the time, I was annoyed Mungo Baobab was not in the figure range, as he was the only character besides the droids and his companion Arin Yam that engaged me. It can't be dismissed so easily that the creator of Mungo Baobab, Admiral Screed, and the writer of Baobab's entire story arc, including the Great Heap TV movie, was none other than Star Wars sound designer Ben Burtt. I didn't know that as a kid, but learning that as an adult didn't surprise me. The end result of Kenner's intended rollout of the two Droids waves front-loaded the line with Thal Jobin episode cast members, leaving figures Jan Tosh, Uncle Gundy, and Kez Iban twisting in the wind like loose threads. And knowing Thal Jobin's White Witch speeder had been planned as a droid's vehicle as well, but never released, makes Kenner's strategy even more baffling. If they'd kept the A-Wing in the Power of the Force line, gone ahead with the White Witch, and ditched the A-Wing pilot for Vlix, at least Kenner would have had all of the major players and vehicle for the first Droids adventure cycle. But they split the teams, giving kids an incomplete play experience with characters from the two initial mediocre adventures, while keeping the superior characters from the later adventures out of reach. That being said, if you are a Kenner Star Wars superfan and you really love the Droids line, you can't go wrong with the ProCustomFigures Lost Wave. I don't think you could do any better, honestly. These aren't 3D printed. They are Kenner quality recreations of the original prototypes. However, they do represent an extremely enigmatic niche of Star Wars history. These are a lost wave from a failed cartoon. To borrow a quote from General Murray in Lawrence of Arabia, the Lost Droids wave would be a sideshow of a sideshow. But much like the Bedouin Army in World War I, the entire Kenner Droids sideshow has become a force to be reckoned with.
Big things have small beginnings, sir.
It's now a prominent and even fashionable sector of vintage collecting. ProCustomFigures Droids Lost Wave takes Kenner Star Wars collecting to a level previously unreachable. The links are in the description.
Admiral Screed. How I miss that man. He was the best officer I ever served with.
I thought you'd have said Thrawn.
Thrawn didn't exist. No officer that smart would have been left on the Outer Rim. He's a fantasy.
Oh. I assume he was killed in the war?
Screed was too cunning for that. Unfortunately, that didn't matter in the end.
What happened?
He encountered a bowl of bad chili in a dingy diner, and died in a bathroom in a bad neighborhood on Tynes Horkey.
Wait, did you say...
Don't do it!
Tynes Horkey!
YouTuber scum.